All right. Well, thanks for all of you joining in to my first ever webinar series. And on the screen are the three topics that we're going to be covering. This one is the basics, high level, 30,000 foot view of the way I see data and how I've used it as a campus leader. Then next Monday, the intermediate, we're going to get into visualizing data and taking it a little bit further. We're going to get into star data and what to do about it, even though it's not coming until August. And then webinar 3 is going to be really cool. I've got On Data who's going to be like a co-host with me, and they're going to show you some things that they're doing with data specifically around growth and those special pops that are now going to be a bigger part of the accountability system. So hopefully you'll hang around for the next two. If not, we're going to record those also and post those so that you see somebody who needs this, who's on your team, you can shoot them that way. And Bloomer, I think it's really cool that you got a whole team on here. Is when I went to my last school, once I taught my team this concept, it 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 just moved us mountains down the road, miles down the road, not mountains, miles down the road. So again, this is high level, 30,000 foot view. We're not going to go into huge detail, but hopefully you can see something you haven't heard before or see something you haven't seen before. So this quote resonates with me every time I see it, not only personally, but professionally. And those of us in education, especially in leadership positions, the job is so vast that you can't learn it all at one time. And that phrase of, if I knew then what I know now, uh, if I had like $1 every time I said that to myself as a school principal, I'd, I'd be a millionaire. And luckily, I had some great mentors along the way who taught me data, who taught me systems, who taught me communication. And once you learn it, then you're just better for it. It's going to help you be a positive influence for your staff and your kids. So I hang on to this one all the time. And then my next favorite one is, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And if you know me, I build systems. That's what I do. That's what I do well. And I know that. I got a long list of things I don't do well, but I do build systems. And as a building leader, whether you're a principal or an academic dean or whatever, if you can systemize things, then that's one less thing you have to worry about. And I was a principal in Northeast for 17 years. And by the time I got to my last campus, I had learned to systemize about 80% of the job. So when I showed up every day, I knew, I was very confident that about 80% of the day was going to go as planned. And I had a lot of reserve to deal with the 20% that wasn't going to go as planned, like air conditioning in the band hall. But if you systemize things, just think about that in your role. If 80% of your job was systemized, was just, I know what's going to happen, the comfort that would give you, the confidence it's going to give you. And when you're off campus, when you're sick, when you have to take days off, that really comes into play because you're confident that the place is not going to fall apart when you're gone. So I'll be saying that throughout the my trainings. And for me, I say systems. Your vocabulary may be routines or processes or protocols. I was just taught the word systems. So whatever works for you, whatever your language is with among your team, you use those interactively. You're going to hear me say systems a lot. So Overall view, as a principal, you manage resources. Your AP is a resource to you. Data is a resource to you. Time. And there are more. I just put these 5 on the screen because I didn't want to make the font small. But everybody says the principal job is just the AP job, just a little bit more. I completely disagree. I think as an AP, you are a resource used by the principal. When you're a principal, you manage resources. And those are 2 different skill sets. And so what I tell leaders a lot of the time, the principal, is make sure you're teaching your APs how to manage resources. Now, Todd, I like what Silverman said on your post the other day of teaching them to have 100% commitment to a project. I think that was brilliant. I liked how he phrased that, and I think that is part of a principal job. But the principal job is 100% taking ownership of 100% of all of the projects, because it all comes back to you, right? But this webinar series is about data. And if we break that down a little bit more and just talk about instructional data, assessment data, if you know your instructional data well, then you can make great adjustments to instruction and great adjustments to intervention. And you can allocate your resources differently and so forth. If you don't know your instructional data, you can't do these very effectively. Or phrased another way, the more you know, the better your decisions are going to be, and you're going to maximize your resources. Make sense? Okay, and that's just instructional data. We've got a lot more to talk about. So just on a regular day, these are some of the things that a leader encounters, and they are all intertwined, and they all go back to the campus leadership, whether it be the leadership team or the principal, however you structure your campus. And once you realize you can adjust one thing and it's going to affect something else, you start to figure out how to maximize your resources and how hard to push in one direction versus another direction. And it may be that you increase instructional effectiveness by working on behavior management, or you become a better communicator that's going to help with your, I don't know, your student morale. But it all comes back, it's all intertwined. Now, if we're digging down deep into data, I want to help y'all maybe gain a little bit more respect for learning your data. And for me, there's five steps to it. It is mining it wherever it is, formatting it so that you can understand it, analyzing it so you find the patterns, the exceptions, the strengths, the weaknesses, communicating what you found, and then deciding what to do about it. And one key thing that I think leaders miss is if you go through this step and you find something that is really working well, you got to protect it. But if you don't know it's working well, you may not know to protect it. So let's say your GT program is just rocking it. The kids are happy, they're performing, they're growing. You know that, the data's telling you that. Well, if you do know that, then when you go to change the master schedule, the master calendar, adjusting resources, you're going to know to protect that program because it's already working well. You don't want to adjust something that's going to negatively affect that program. But if you don't go through these steps, you're not going to get to the end point of, okay, what do we protect and what do we need to adjust? So some key questions to think about is, okay, how do I get the data I want? Is it going to be me? Am I going to delegate that to my assistant principal, academic dean, maybe a data processor, maybe someone at central office? Who's going to get me the data? And then how do I systemize it so that it comes to me regularly? And then how do I analyze it? Am I just going to sit down with a notepad and start looking through it? Are we going to talk about this at the leadership team? And then how do I communicate it? And I've got some suggestions for all of those. So again, you can write some great goals in your campus plan or your tip, but if you don't have good systems to get you there, you've just written some great goals in your campus plan and tip. So think about it like this, that you've got data on the left. It's going to flow to you. You're going to go through those 5 steps, maybe 4, and then turn around and communicate that to someone. And some of you in your role may have not thought about this. You may have taken it for granted. It's coming to you, or it's not your role to communicate. I'm going to show you some things I think will help. I sat down and I thought about some of the things that come to me as a principal. And this is just some of the data. So just look at the left side for right now. And like John at Lead Forward says right now, there's not a school today that doesn't have enough data. We're all waiting for August 11th, but we've got enough data. And these are just some of the data that's out there. And then it would come to me as the leader, the chief communicating officer, and then I'm going to turn around and communicate that to my office staff and my leadership team. So let's take student attendance for an example. When I know how our student attendance is going, whether going well or not going well, we have subpops that are lagging behind. Maybe we have 4 or 5 students that are in a certain situation, students that their attendance is not doing well. Once I know that, I can turn around to my office staff and say, okay, we're really keeping an eye. We need to keep an eye on this certain group of kids, right? We want them to be on this campus. So I've communicated that. Then when we have leadership team, I'm going to communicate that again. So I'm practicing communicating what I've learned through the data. And then at our faculty meeting, we're going to talk about it also. So it's a third time I've communicated it. And then your grade level chairs or your department meetings or so forth. And then by the time you get to your PTA, you have practiced communicating what you've learned, what you're going to do about it, and how they can help. So you practice this also communicating your data. Does that make sense? Any questions, comments on that? And again, this is just some data that I pulled, thinking it gives you an overall look at it. Now down at the bottom, it's what kind of data do you want? How often do you want it? And in what format? Now this is what we're talking about, systemizing data. So let's just take the second row or second column. So my title money, my budgeted funds, my SAF-CAF, my donations. I need to keep track of that money often. So I would tell my secretary, okay, every Monday, I want it in my box by 10 o'clock, and I want it printed out, and I wanted anything highlighted that's not there. Like if we have a contract and it's not showing on the budget, I need those annotated. So that's how I systemize that data coming to me. I don't have to go look for it. The student attendance, that's when I tell my data processor, I want you to keep a chart. Any kid with 5 or 10 or 15, I need to know that every 2 weeks. Same thing with staff attendance. So you're organizing these systems so that that data comes to you. You don't have to go find it. You don't have to go mine it. Now, there are times where you're going to have to go dig into Edgefor or DMAC or whatever, but if you can have central office send you a customized report every Friday in your inbox, then you're systemizing data. And then on the right side, that's a whole other webinar series about how to communicate it to, but you can't communicate what you don't know. So think about who can be bringing this data to you and in what format and how often.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
Todd suggested maybe adding CCMR data for the high school secondary
Yeah.
since that's such a big part.
Good point. Good point, Todd. Yeah, that's that's gonna be a big one for you guys. Okay, so just think of this flow, this visual as you're moving along through the year. If this is something you can communicate to your staff, that this is how we roll. This is how information is going to be flowing this year. So that they know maybe you're going to up your game on data. You're going to up your game on communicating some of the things you're finding within the data. And with a large school, some departments, they shelter in place in their department or their grade level, and they don't really know how the ELA department is doing, or they don't know how kindergarten is doing. That's how you build the community, and you break down those silos. Okay, so let's at the top. I thought about as an AP, as an assistant principal. You're probably in charge of student attendance, office referrals, tardies, and some grade level data. Now, if that comes to you as an assistant principal, you would need to turn around and report out to the leadership team, maybe to the principal of what you're finding specifically and what you're advising to do about it. And then if you can find a peer and start communicating and practicing communicating to a peer, then when you do communicate to the leadership team, you're going to be more fluent. Maybe a peer at another campus has already looked at that data and they've already come up with some better suggestions or things that are working on their campus. So that's just how a flow could work. So you'd think about if you're an academic dean or someone at Central, what's the most relevant data for your position? How can you systemize the flow, like the chart before? Who can make you better at analyzing data? So again, it's not all on you to figure this out. If you've got somebody at Central Office or another campus who really rocks at data, tap into them, ask them for help. What software do you need to learn? And that changes every freaking year. And then how will you communicate the analysis of that data? So I know people are wanting to know about STAR data, and it's coming. So quickly, I'm just going to hit it, and then I'm going to move on. But you can systemize STAR data too. And I thought of here are some of the categories that you're going to want STAR data on. Just some of them. Now, you can have that in your head, or you can put that into a system so that when you get that STAR data, you systemize the analysis of that data with all of these groups. And here is my system. It's a checklist. That's all it is. It's a checklist. And the end product looks like this of on the left-hand side, I list all the assessments. So if it's secondary, you're going to 6th grade all the way to English 2. And then I put a check mark every time I've analyzed it so that I don't run out of steam when I get to US history or biology. Start strong in 6th grade, and then by the time in US history, you're just done with it, and you don't want to look at the data consistently and thoroughly. Well, this is just a system that helps you do it. And next webinar, I'm going to get deeper into this, but I'm just showing you how easy it could be. And if we're talking about steps, because some of you are step people, it would be you're finding it in Eduphoria, DMAC, on data. However, I personally pull it over into Excel so that I can do a lot of manipulating with it and creating charts and bar graphs, those kinds of things. Then I start looking through it. Then I have conversations. Simple steps, but it takes time and it takes a plan. Okay, so if you're looking at, so what do I do? Okay, get good at whatever program that's going to give you data. And if you're in charge of a huge school, then you're going to make sure your people are getting good at the programs. Looking at the on data webinars, which are phenomenal. Getting better at Eduphoria or whatever, going to training, because you need them to be really good. And if you come up with, hey, I want to see how my 504 boys in 7th grade are doing, you need somebody to go get that data for you. And if they don't know how to go get it, well, then you have a great idea, but you're not getting great data. Learning how to get really organized, and I'm talking really organized, like this chart, you can start thinking about what data do I want to see campus-wide? And start making those, just writing those notes down. We'll get it into a chart next week, but get really organized. And then how are we going to communicate? Is that every leadership team meeting, we're going to have a data section, and somebody is going to report out what they found in data. That's just an agenda item that we're going to put on there. And then I think you search for a partner who thinks like you do. I had a partner principal, and he loved data as much as I did. And man, we just made each other better, because he would find things I wouldn't find in on data, and I would find things that he wouldn't find in Eduphoria, and we just made each other better. So I highly recommend you find someone who thinks that way. And then it comes down to this. If you can just visualize this, what data is going to come to me, and then how am I going to communicate it? Okay. So if you choose to add me as a contact, put down systems, because you might forget my name 2 weeks down the road and you're like, I don't remember his name, but he talked about systems all the freaking time. And then that's my phone number right there. You can call, text, email me anytime. Because what I want for y'all is for you to be confident in what you're doing. Because I think when you're confident, you're going to make better decisions for your kids. If you don't know what the data says, you're probably making decisions, because that's the job, but you're going to make better decisions if you're confident about knowing your data. If you can systemize 80% of your job, just think about how that's going to feel. Knowing what to protect and what needs to be changed. If you're at a bilingual campus, is your bilingual program working well? Or is it your monolingual program that needs to be adjusted? We're going to get into visualizing data next time. Remember, I've got a YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that has about 20 videos on there. I try to keep them 20 minutes or less. And that is it for this webinar. Did I make it on time? 33 minutes. So, any questions, any final thoughts, anything that I can help you with right now? I'm going to go ahead and stop the videoing, and then we're going to